Hey guys, Stealth here. In this video of the Naval Guide, we're looking at the escort ships. These ships are specifically designed to escort the larger command ships. Now, this is only the NATO ships escort section, so don't expect any Red 4 units in this video yet. I will be doing a specific video on the Red 4 escort ships. For now, let's see what kind of ships we have here. We got the Baek Nu, we got the Chim Cheree, we got the Donghae, the Pegasus and the Pohang. All of these ships have their specific strengths and weaknesses, and all of these ships have a specific mission profile. If you use the ship for the right profile, you're going to do good with that ship. If you use it for the wrong profile, you're going to see it go down very quickly. So let's get started with the Baek Nu. The Baek Nu is a 75 point ship, which makes it pretty cheap. I mean, it's more cheap than some of the tanks. And this ship is an escort air defense. You can see this by the fact that it carries 12 of these naval SAMs, the RGM-66D. These have a good range against helicopters and airplanes. They also carry a naval gun, doing a range of 2800 meters, doing some HE power. But the best weapon on this ship is definitely this RGM-66D. This makes the Baek Nu a very capable ship of defending your units against incoming anti-ship missiles, but they will also run out of these missiles very quickly because they only carry 12 of them. They do not have very good sea whiz, they only got bad sea whiz, so don't expect these ships to be very capable of defending themselves. But again, they are more geared towards defending other ships. They are the escort. They have this Mark 34 naval gun. You can use this naval gun to bombard naval targets, but most naval targets which you're going to engage in already have a range greater than 2800 on the main gun, especially if you're looking at the USSR command ships. They can also engage helicopters, and that makes this a pretty good gun, because engaging helicopters at 2100 meter range makes them very capable of taking large groups of helicopters down, because they fire a lot of rounds per minute, 28, so they fire every 2 seconds. They also carry these dual Browning M2s, and you can actually see those ships right here on the side. These guns right here on the side, one over there and one over there. These things are aiming sideways. I don't really use these ships very often, so I'm not really sure how far these ships or how far these weapons can angle. But I'm guessing they're going to be angling about 90 degrees, so they might be able to go 45 degrees that way and 45 degrees that way. So don't expect these things to be hitting targets behind your ship. But these things are rarely used because they only have a range of 1225, both versus ground and versus helicopters. So don't really expect these things to be effective against any kind of target. An interesting thing about the Baek Nu is that it's a coaster, and that means that this ship can go very close to the shore. In those situations, if you have a lot of infantry on that shore, these Brownings might be useful. But the coaster element is especially important because the coaster ships can get a lot closer than the deep sailing ships, such as the command ships. So that's something that the Baek Nu does very well. And that means that with the Baek Nu, if you're having an area under your control next to the water, you can bring in 1 or 2 Baek Nus and have a long-range anti-airplane defense for only 150 points. For 150 points you can also get 1 Patriot and then some, but this thing is almost as good as a Patriot and it carries more missiles. So that is something that I do like about the Baek Nu. As you can see also by the detection capability, it has very good air detection, which means that this ship is particularly geared toward engaging air targets. Its speed is pretty good, its ECM is only 10%, so which will barely dodge any missile fire, and that means that you're going to have to be very careful with these ships. The Chim Cheree is a ship that is just stuffed with anti-ship missile batteries, and or actually I should say missile defenses. That would make it a bit more clear. You can see that they have a couple of these guns on them. Those are the Sea Vulcan Sea Whiz. So where normal ships have the Sea Whiz as a sort of integral part of the ship, which is not actually one of the weapon systems you can control, the Chim Cheree has 2 of these Sea Vulcans firing at a range of 1400 meters, doing 1900 rounds a minute. That means they will run out of ammo in 3 minutes firing full time, but most of the time you won't be using them full time. They'll just be giving off a couple of bursts if you're facing a lot of anti-ship missiles. The main purpose of the Chim Cheree is to defend your fleet against anti-ship missiles. That's what they're very, very good at. What they're not good at is engaging other ships. They do carry the Bofors L60, and that's a naval gun we have seen on other ships as well. But don't expect this thing to be very capable of taking out other ships, because that's just not what they were meant to do. You can see this by the fact that they have only 50 points of strength, they got 20% ECM, but especially the 50 points of strength is going to go down very, very quickly if you're facing off against some large naval guns, or ATGMs for that matter. They are also going to go very easily through the 2 armor on every side except the top. And that means that the Chim Cheree is against ATGMs, like all ships, defenseless and pretty vulnerable. So use this thing close to your main ships like a Kongo or a Hatsuyuki, and these will aid your Hatsuyuki in defending itself against anti-ship missiles. Next up is the Donghae. The Donghae is a ship which sits somewhere in the middle between supporting the coast and supporting your forces against helicopters and airplanes. As you can see, it carries no sea-whiz, just absolutely none. It carries no defensive weaponry, so none of these weapon systems that are mounted on the ship can fire at ship missiles. That means that if you fire an anti-ship missile at a Donghae, it is pretty much always going to hit until the ECM manages to deflect the missile. But that doesn't happen very often. What you can use this ship for especially well is stunning helicopters and airplanes, because they have a very good gun for that. They got the dual Emerlek, I think is how you pronounce it. The dual Emerlek 30, firing at a range of 3,500 meters against helicopters and airplanes, which makes them effectively a very, very long range anti-air gun. That's basically how I see these ships. You can also use these guns to fire at the shore, but they only have a range of 1,400 meters. If you want to fire at the shoreline, you have a better chance of doing that with the dual Bofors L56, which is a naval autocannon, so it has a bit less power than the Automalara, but it fires faster. As I mentioned, this ship has no sea-whiz, so you will need to team it up with other ships that do have sea-whiz. But if you have an enemy helicopter group which is threatening your ships or your units which are close to the shore, having a Donghae out there will rapidly dispose of those helicopters. So that is something that the ship does very well. Engaging other ships can be done because the Automalara has a decent rate of fire, and especially if you can get it close enough for the Bofors to fire, you're going to stun the enemy ship if you do enough damage to it. And you can also use all of this firepower to make sure that the ship will have all sorts of damage on it. For example, its radar taken out, its captain going down, stuff like that. But don't expect these things on their own to take down stuff like a Sovereign, for example. They're just too big for one Donghae. You will need to swarm them. And if you see one Sovereign or a ship like it, don't expect 4 Donghaes to just take it down, because the Sovereign is going to go, oh look, no sea-whiz, and it just fires anti-ship missiles at your Donghaes and they're going to go down. So when you're using these ships, be very, very careful. They are not meant as anti-ship ships. They're meant as escorts against air threats. Next up is the Pegasus. You can see that this is a bit of a weird ship. It seems to be sticking out of the water, and that is in fact true. This is, I believe it's what they call an aquasail. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right term. But what these things do is when they get up to a good speed, they do get up to a good speed, they have a speed of 38 knots, which is one of the fastest in the game. This ship is quite literally lifted out of the water by the aquasails that you can see here, those on the bow and on the stern here. The Pegasus are designed purely to take down other ships. They fire 8 harpoons in bursts of 2, And as you can see by the direction of these harpoon launchers, they're armed towards the front of the ship. So these things fire forward. And that makes it a very capable anti-ship unit, but not very capable at defending itself, because it carries no CIWS, it does not have any ECM, or at least it's not listed here. So pretty much any missile that is aimed at the Pegasus will hit it. The only variable you still have is the accuracy of the ship that you're firing it from. These things have good optics, which means they can also be using their main automelara to go after ground targets, helicopters and even airplanes at short range. But the main reason when you bring these in, and I prefer to bring them in groups of 2 or 3, 4 or 5 is better because then you can be sure of several hits. But that's when the harpoons, and that's when this ship really shines. That's what it was designed for. So if you use it in that role, you have the best possible deployment for the Pegasus. Keep in mind though, with one thing you need to know about the Pegasus is that once they've fired their harpoons and you gave them an order to attack a specific target, they think, oh shit, we're out of harpoons. Let's close in and go with the automelara. The harpoons fire at 8.7 kilometer range, which means that they can be safely behind your CIWS bubble, so your anti-ship missile defenses. Once they've fired these Pegasus or these harpoons, they might go in for the kill with the automelara. And that means that, and I've had this happen, they will punch through your anti-ship missile defenses. They'll just sail right away from them. And that means that they're very, very susceptible to anti-ship missile fire. So these things are very good at taking down ships, but you gotta micromanage them or they will die. Also, if you don't have any anti-ship missile defenses, do not bring in a Pegasus, because they're just gonna get taken down by anti-ship planes, anti-ship missiles mounted on other ships, and anti-ship missile batteries which are posted on the enemy shores. Final unit in this video is the Pohang. This ship is a bit of a mixed unit, because it has an automelara main gun, as most ships do. It carries only 2 harpoons, and you can see the harpoons over here at the back of the ship. They're aimed at about 15-degree angle off the axis of the main ship. Of the main axis of the ship. So these things will fire more or less sideways. Don't expect these things to fire 2 of them at the same time. They sometimes do it, but you gotta really hit that sweet spot of having the missile or the missile launcher capability directly at the target. What this ship does reasonably well is defend itself and other ships against other units. It can use the anti-ship missile for that, it can use the automelara for that, and it can use the Dardo CIWS for that. These are very, very good anti-ship missile batteries, or anti-ship missile defenses, I should say. They have a high rate of fire, higher even than the Sea Falcon, which we saw on the Chim Cheree. And I believe they're a bit more accurate. You can see that the Dardo CIWS has better range, also a better range against helicopters, which makes them extremely lethal to helicopters. Because if you get too close, this thing will fire 2,000 rounds at you in 1 minute, and your helicopter will go down in about 10 seconds. They also have better accuracy. They have a stabilizer, which is also a lot better than the one you found on the Chim Cheree. They got more HE power on the caliber, so it's 40mm rounds versus 20mm rounds. And their suppression factor, oh interesting, they don't have a suppression factor. The Chim Cherees do have a suppression factor, so you can... Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong unit. I was comparing it to the Browning. Anyway, the range on the CIWS is the same. The helicopter range is better on the Pohang. Airplane range better on the Pohang. Stabilizer and accuracy better on the Pohang. HE power is the same, rate of fire is a bit higher. So that means that the Pohang is actually a ship which is a bit better capable of defending your friendlies against anti-ship missiles and dishing it out at the same time. When you're using Pohangs though, be very sure that you micromanage these harpoons, because if they just fire them one by one, you're wasting harpoons. The way I use harpoons is mostly as a last punch. It's the last weapon that I fire when the enemy ship has already been heavily damaged. Especially if it's been losing radar operators, radar antenna and stuff like that, because that is when you cannot defend a ship against your anti-ship missiles. So that's when I use the RGM-84 harpoons against it. One thing to note also about the Pohang is that the Automalara does not have the def tag, so it cannot be used to defend your ship against anti-ship missiles. This is something you have to keep in mind, because it means that the ship is a bit less capable of defending itself against anti-ship missiles than, say, a Congo, which can do that. But overall, I do like this ship. It's a good escort, and this Dardo Seawiz is a very, very nice addition to the defense of your fleet. Do keep in mind that I believe the Dardo Seawiz, let's see if I can find it on the ship. I'm not sure which it is actually. I'm not sure. I don't think this is it. I was going to say that it's probably mounted on the back of the ship, as most Seawiz systems. So if your ship is facing that way, and the missiles are coming from over there, the Seawiz might not be able to catch them. So always try and have your ship engage sideways, so like that. And this is when all of your guns can fire at the target. Now one thing to note, or one last thing to note I should say, is that this ship has Automalaras dual. It doesn't say it here, but there are two of them. So they are better capable of suppressing targets on the coastline than it states in the manual, more or less. Also, these guns, they are not specifically mentioned on the ship. These might be the Dardos. I'm not sure. I think they are the Dardo close-in weapon systems. So this means that they have one on the bow and one on the front. Sorry, one on the bow and one on the stern of the ship. So they can defend the ship against all sides. Still, it is better to have it go sideways, and especially when you're engaging missiles from that area or over there, because then all of the guns can fire instead of only two. So that covers the escort ships section for NATO. Let me know if you have any questions about these ships. I might just be able to answer them. Leave a comment down below if you have any specific questions about these ships, how to use them, how to deploy them. Anything that I have not covered in this video, I'm happy to answer. I will be doing a lot more of these naval guides, so expect a lot more of these videos on the ships, because there is still quite a bit of confusion. And sometimes in 10v10s I've seen people just waste ships or just keep ships bottled up until forever. So I hope this guide was useful. If it was, please hit like. If you want to see more videos of this guide, please watch the playlist, link is in the description, and subscribe to my channel to keep up with new videos. For now, thanks for watching and see you next video.